drugs in the workplace. So if he doesn't show up, I'm gonna say, let's all use drugs so we can get through the workplace. How about that?
I thought they'd be shutting down this parking lot, but they're not.
Yeah, there's a lot of cars out there, you know.
Yeah.
Yep, that's her. Hello?
Yes.
You've muted it.
Yeah, we're good to go. We just muted it. Yes, I put it in mute.
Good morning.
Thanks. Bye. So she's ready whenever you guys are.
Do you need a clicker?
I should have a clicker that works in here.
Okay.
I was gonna, should I use your computer or mine?
Whichever one you want to do.
Maybe I'll try using this one first.
Okay, I was gonna say, just as long as you have like an HDMI cord, we can just pop it out into yours.
Just, what do you prefer? Because I do have an HDMI, or do you, I just got it all on a thumb drive.
Thumb drive works great.
Okay.
And then we have the mic for you.
Okay.
Sweet. We did put it on mute, so you'll get the button right up here to
All right.
unmute it. Just remember, if they ask you a question, to repeat the question.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's
Right here?
right. Yeah.
Okay. Jenica coming this morning?
She's not gonna make it down. She is swamped right now.
Okay. So what's all this tour of Utah?
A bike race.
Yeah. So it's a bike race. When do they come through then? All day today or
I think so.
They start at 9,
at 9 o'clock?
they just go through.
Do they come down Main Street?
So they're coming down Main, they're gonna be going up to, they're starting here, going back down to Huntsville, coming back down this way, and ending up out at Lake Valley.
Okay. How much time do you normally take for these meetings? Okay.
You know.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Huh?
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Okay, perfect. Just put your mic on and then just make sure it's about 6 inches away.
Okay.
It's on mute. So you can just unmute it on that top button right now. Yeah.
Okay.
And then we'll go ahead and get started. Before we get started with this, I want to introduce Mariana. She is back working with us again. She has taken Melissa's spot. So if you have wellness questions, just let her know, or I can help you with that. So I'd like to turn the time over to Flint Bell from Workman's Comp to take over the rap.
Okay. Thank you. We're a little bit. Let me try this. Is that better?
Yep.
It's almost too loud. We're a little bit few in number this morning. I guess that must be a popular race that's going on out there. Anybody going to watch it today? I wasn't sure when I drove in. It was kind of hard to navigate around here and find a spot to park, but I guess it affects a lot of Utah counties. I was down visiting with Davis County yesterday, and I guess it goes there either later today or tomorrow. But we're going to talk a little bit about drug-free workplace. That still sounds a little loud. Can everybody still hear me okay? All right. We're going to talk about drug-free workplace. And this is not meant to be a comprehensive everything you need to know about drug testing and all the different types of drugs. It's more of an awareness thing. And having the benefits of having a drug policy as well as doing drug testing and that type of thing. The facts are that in Utah and across the country, some places worse than others, but about 75% of illicit drug users are employed. It's not just the people that you see, the homeless population, or those that you see out on the street and you think, well, those are the drug users, but the rest of us are all okay. That's quite startling. 75% of drug users have a job. More now, you hear all the time about abusing prescriptions. I just heard down now they're trying to pass some legislations for this opioid epidemic that we have. Marijuana seems to be the illicit drug of choice, and it's not even an illicit drug in several states now. Several of our neighboring states have made that legal. 1 in 10 U.S. workers has a drinking problem. Substance abusers, 25% less productive, 5 times more likely to file a workers' comp claim. Substance abusers use 2.5 times the medical benefits, the insurance benefits, as your other employees. So what is a drug? A drug is any substance which can impair a person's ability to safely function in society. We all know about illegal drugs, illegal controlled substances, cocaine, heroin, marijuana. And like I said earlier, cutting it in and out. I just got it right there. Is that?
That sounds better. We can hear.
So a little bit, maybe move it a little closer. Okay. Let me try that. I'll have to speak a little bit quieter. I'm used to almost yelling, so I'll try that. So we all know what illegal drugs are, but also prescription medications. Valium, codeine, alcoholic beverages, chemical solvents. You know, we've heard of that before. People who will be out huffing gasoline, huffing spray paint. Natural plant intoxicants, peyote probably is the most common that we've heard of there. This is a big cost and a big impact on for companies, for employers. Those who use drugs, alcohol, change jobs more frequently, absent 3 times more often than non-abusers, 3 times more likely to be late, 3 to 4 times more likely to be involved in a workplace accident. The cost to American businesses, $50 to $100 billion annually. Hard-hit industries and occupations, and I do not mean that if you're in one of these occupations or one of your children that you are a drug user, but these are where nationwide we see more drug use than others. Construction, food services, manufacturing, mining, certain sectors of transportation. That's kind of scary. White-collar jobs and athletics. Commonly abused drugs in Utah: alcohol, heroin, marijuana, amphetamines, and prescription drugs. Benefits of having a drug and alcohol-free policy: increased morale, increased creativity, positive public image, fewer accidents, reduced insurance costs, reduced turnover. reduced employee theft and fraud, reduced absenteeism, reduced health insurance costs, and it just makes good business sense. So for some occupations, if you have a CDL, you are subject to the federal DOT regulations. What happens if you happen to live in Colorado or Oregon and you're a truck driver? Are you allowed to smoke marijuana? No, the federal rules, they take precedence over any state legislation that may allow you to use marijuana. It's a 5-panel test, and all commercial drivers need to follow that. There's been some other legislation. One of the primary ones was the Drug-Free Workplace Act, 1988, that made organizations with federal grants in excess of $100,000 mandatory drug testing for employees that worked on those projects. And for a government job, is that a lot of money? No, that's nothing for a government contract. So what you should have, and what we're going to talk today, some of these we're going to talk a lot more than others, but you should have a substance abuse policy. Does Box Elder County have a written substance abuse policy? Okay, I'm going to be coming back to that a little bit as we talk here. Should have an employee education and awareness program. Do you have something where employees, if they do test positive for drugs, that they are able to go and seek some type of drug rehab or assistance? Is that part of it? Okay. Supervisor training. Your supervisors are key, particularly when it comes to for-cause drug testing or for suspicion drug testing. They should have additional training, even above and beyond. I mean, like I said, today is just awareness training, but they should have training on what are the signs and symptoms that they should look for. And drug testing. I've been out to several companies before, fewer now than 20 years ago, but I'd say, do you have a drug policy? Oh yeah, we have a very strict drug policy. You cannot use drugs, alcohol, or be under the influence on the job. Okay, so you do drug testing. No, we don't do drug testing, but that's our policy. Well, how do you know? The drug testing puts some teeth into your policy. Your policy needs to be specific. It can't just be, we do not support the use of drugs or alcohol in the workplace. You've got to spell it out, state the unacceptability of alcohol and other drug use on the job, policy and procedures. If the procedures are combined on a document, each time you want to change a procedure, you should give written notice. It's one thing that you want to have everything by the book, and your employees should sign that. I agree to follow the drug policy. I know of cases where an employer has had a drug policy and then they changed it and they didn't bother getting their employees to sign the changes, and the employees have basically won when they took that to a hearing because they said, I never signed that. Well, isn't it common sense that you can't use drugs and alcohol? Yeah, but I never signed that. So you want to make sure that you do that by the book. Policy, a general statement of intent. Who is covered? Who or whom is covered? In some organizations, and more often now, everyone is covered, but I had some that would say, well, only safety-sensitive positions, only our drivers, only our forklift operators. They're the only ones who are covered. Office employees covered, for example. Prohibited drug and alcohol acts, the type of testing allowed, the reasons for testing, definitions, discipline plan, rehabilitation plan, employee assistance, if you have those in your policy. Now, I know some companies, and they say, one strike and you're out. They do not have an employee assistance program. They do not allow employees to go to drug rehab. They just say, no, we're telling you right up front here now, you don't get a second chance. Your policy should describe the position, and if it's all positions that will be subject to drug and alcohol testing, what and how the testing will be done. Some companies, they administer that in-house. They have little test kits, and it would be administered by your supervisor. You go in, you do your sample, that's sent to an outside lab. Then, if it comes up positive, they send out a second sample to a lab to verify that. Others, it might be and in a lot of situations with us, it is the local work med where they're going to do the drug testing. The consequences of a positive test result or failure to comply, or if the sample has been tempered. I get questions, not every month, but about once a year. I will get, once or twice a year, I'll get a call and they'll say, hey, Flint, we had an employee that tested positive for this particular drug. What do you think we should do? I'm not an attorney. What does your policy say? Well, we say that we'll take disciplinary action, but what should that disciplinary action be? What does your policy say? You know, what did you, and so you want to make sure that it's spelled out. Collection procedures, methods of reporting tests, methods of reviewing positive tests by a medical review officer. How many of you are familiar with that term, MRO, medical review officer? Anybody know what that means? So most companies and most drug testing companies, it goes through, rather than the lab telling the supervisor or the manager, hey, tested positive for this opiate or tested positive for marijuana, here you go. They have, as part of the fee that you pay, you have that reviewed by a medical review officer. That medical review officer is the one that, if they test positive, they go back to the employee and they say, hey, you tested positive for this. Are you under any current medications? And if that employee says, yes, I have a valid prescription for this drug and it matches the drug that they've did, then the medical review officer says, okay, send me that prescription in. If it is a valid prescription for that time, for that person, that is not a positive drug test. That would be reported as a negative to the company. But what if it is their spouse's prescription, or it's their prescription from 7 years ago for a painkiller? That doesn't count. It's got to be a valid prescription. But that medical review officer, they basically just make sure that everything's administered fairly so that that company, that employer, doesn't get accused of discriminating against their employees. The confidentiality procedures. It's important that you keep things confidential. If somebody tests positive, you don't go and broadcast that at the next safety meeting. Said, hey, the reason we got rid of this employee was they tested positive, and here's how much their levels were compared to the cutoff point. You don't do that. Reasonable suspicion testing protocol, and that can be quite tricky. At times that for cause or under suspicion testing. Transportations of employees thought to be impaired for testing. That's really important. When they have an injury, who takes them to the work med so that they can get their testing done? What about if they're impaired and you suspect that you're saying, you know what, you're exhibiting the symptoms of being high, we want you to take a drug test. Do you have the supervisor take them, or do you just say, hey, go and take a drug test? You want to have somebody accompany them. And you know, it's kind of funny, I pose that question and you're kind of in your mind, you're kind of going, duh, of course we wouldn't do that, but companies do. Payment of testing. Who's supposed to pay for the drug test? Can you make the employee pay for that? Or if, no, you have to pay for it. Now, if you send them to, you allow them to do some type of rehab and they want their job back, usually it's the norm for them to pay for the rehab and that test, and the test a week later and 6 months later, whatever your policy is. But the initial testing, you actually have to pay for that. That can't come out of their pocket. The procedures and the forms, forms for managers, the forms that you give them and they take that and get drug tested. Procedures for addressing diluted, adulterated, substituted, or not suitable for testing specimens. Okay, give me an example of that.
If you drink too much water, then it will just.
They try and drink too much water and to make the test go. Or they, and when you go to, I've been to a few seminars, training meetings on drug testing where it's been the actual lab that does the testing. It amazes me the lengths that people will go to keep their job, take their drugs, and try and pass a drug test. And they give examples of different types of things. A person stopping by their house on the way. They even have employees, some manufacturers where the employees wear on their body a specimen, a urine sample basically. And they put it in a balloon or they'll put it next to their body so that it takes this, and it's their, they've had situations before where a man has went, it is kind of gross. One of them that they were telling me is a man went, and apparently there's a difference between male and female specimens, and the guy submitted a female specimen. So, and he was pregnant, by the way. So no, I'm just kidding about that. But the lengths they will go to. So you have to put in different procedures. That is the same as failing a drug test. You can go right now, and there's a magazine, several magazines. The one that I'm familiar with, and no, I don't have a prescription, but it's High Times, okay? If you go to High Times, in the back of that, they will have ways to beat a drug test. You can purchase guaranteed 100% clean, dehydrated urine and a little kit, and you wear that kit. Then you go in, if you're not observed, and you heat that up. It's got a little heater in it and everything, and you're guaranteed to pass a drug test. And that's about $100. It's a lot of work, isn't it? But you need to make sure that that is the same as failing the drug test. Emergency procedures. Well, if you have post-accident testing, when do you do that? What if the person is incapacitated? And you've got to have procedures for dealing with those who are severely injured, and you would do the testing, you know, at the most appropriate time. You're obviously more worried about saving their life than you are hurrying and doing a drug test. What are the grievance procedures? What if that employee says, hey, I want to appeal this. I've never used drugs in my life, and somehow they messed up. That's a false positive. How records are going to be retained and stored. Define what constitutes an infraction of work policy and describe the consequences. Different companies, some companies, I don't imagine that Box Elder County is one of them, but some companies have, and especially when you get into businesses with a product and sales people and all that, they'll have company parties where you can get drinks, you know, on the house, and the company will pay for those. You're entertaining clients. It's really important for those companies to have a policy. How can you blame an employee if an employee, maybe they're in sales and they're entertaining clients, hoping to make a big sale, so they buy them drinks and they drink and they get drunk? Well, is that a violation of company policy? So you really need to define those. What about the, and again, probably doesn't apply here, doesn't apply to my employer, but if you have a Christmas party, and throughout the nation, a lot of Christmas parties or New Year's Eve parties are known for serving alcohol. Really important that you train your supervisors on their role in your drug testing program and in your overall substance abuse policy. I'm not going to say a whole lot about employee education and awareness. Some companies do have, they give you a second chance or a third chance. Some companies pay for that. Some require the employee to pay for that, the employee assistance program. And especially if an employee comes in and says, hey, boss, I've got a drug problem. I've got an alcohol problem. Many companies are good about not saying, well, hit the road then. They say, okay, we want to help you. What do we need to do to help you? And sometimes they share the cost of those. That's probably all I'll say. I don't know, do you have an EAP for Box Elder County? Okay. Supervisor training and employee training. It's important to have information on how alcohol and other drugs affect the company's productivity. Why are we having this drug policy? Why do we have that in place? Is it so we can pick on you, so you have one more thing to worry about? No. It's so that we can have more productivity, more quality, less absenteeism, so that we can reduce our healthcare costs or accident rates. You should go over your substance abuse policy. That should be readily accessible to your employees. They should sign off that they understand that and that they agree to follow that. The consequences of using drugs or alcohol, it might be that marijuana that they smoked on Sunday night that's affecting them Monday morning, and they might still be under the influence of that and subject to the terms of that when they come to work. And there's been several court cases with that in different states, and it seems to be decided a little bit differently depending on the state that you live in, saying, well, I'm not under the influence when I come to work, but yet that THC, that metabolite of marijuana, is still in my system. Health effects of alcohol and other drugs. How to get help, description of the services that are available. A thorough explanation of your testing procedures. Again, we want to spell out the consequences of testing positive. Failing to cooperate with the testing process. What do you do for the employee that you say, okay, random has come up, you need to go down here, and they decide, you find out a week later they never went. Procedures for ensuring accuracy and confidentiality. If you're doing the specimens in-house, that is really, really important. If you're doing them like my company does down at the WorkMed, they take care of all that, the chain of custody, so that people don't get their samples switched with someone else, and retest procedures. So this is really important, supervisor training. Supervisors should be able to develop and communicate job performance standards that, and this should be not just related to drug and alcohol, but what are your standards? Who are the enforcers, basically, of your safety rules? Who are the enforcers in the workplace? It's your first line supervisors. They need to know what for-cause testing is. If someone is under suspicion, they need to know what that entails. And it's got to be work-related. They have to, see someone, well, they need to really document. This is really important. If you are going to terminate someone or send someone down to be tested because they're under suspicion, why do you suspect them? Well, I've seen them in the last 3 weeks. I've seen them smoking. I've seen them going out and doing this bizarre behavior. Well, did you document the exact date and time they did that? Well, no, but I'm sure that I saw them. Make sure that you document that. Supervisors should be able to communicate with employees, set appropriate time limits for improvement, emphasize that lack of improvement could result in disciplinary action or termination. Participate in educating those employees that work under them on your drug policy. Give a background on that. They should have a basic understanding of the different drugs, the symptoms of use and abuse of those drugs, and the aspects of physiological and psychological aspects of drug and alcohol addiction. The methods they use for detecting drug and alcohol use. Now that's just the basic testing methods that they use, so that when people ask them questions, they're able to answer those. Another question that always comes up at every drug seminar that I've been to, well, I ate a bunch of poppy seed muffins before I took my drug test. So what's the answer to that? That's why I tested positive for opiates. I ate some poppy seed muffins. Will that fail the drug test? The people that do the drug testing say, no way, no how. That they say, if you ate 3 bags of poppy seeds, maybe. But the amount that you're going to get in a poppy seed muffin is not going to fail the drug test. Know the laws regarding drug possession. Now, that is especially tricky in these other states that have legalized certain drugs like marijuana. If you're in Colorado and an employee has marijuana in your parking lot in their car, is that an infraction of your policy? I don't know. Depends on the state. In Utah, it's pretty easy. Behavioral issues. If you have someone that comes in and you see a mood change. You see they're normally happy, but all of a sudden they get withdrawn, depressed, uncommunicative. Periods of sleeplessness, or, and for some drugs like your meth, boy, they're the ones, they never tire. They're the Energizer Bunny. They're just go, go, go. Personal hygiene, habits or changes. Poor hygiene and personal care. Track marks on arms or legs. It was kind of sad. I was out on a visit out of state with one of my bosses, and he got a flat tire, and as part of the rental agreement, you don't have to change your own flat tire. In fact, there wasn't a spare tire. So he called these people that do that change the tires. A guy came out really nice. He came out, changed the tire, went on his way, and my boss and I both looked at each other and says, yeah, did you see those? It looked like that. All up and down his arm, up and down his leg, his face. He had marks all over on his face, and it's like, yep, unfortunately, he's a drug user. And now he's driving. You know, he's driving to help somebody else. Really a nice guy, felt bad for him, but that's something that employer, but who knows? He doesn't have doesn't check in every day. He's out on these calls, so maybe it's been a while since his supervisor has saw him. Alcohol abuse, we probably all know what some of the symptoms are. I'm not an alcoholic, I just have a lot of reasons to celebrate. Irritability, mood swings, depression, flushed skin, broken capillaries on the face, that red face. I remember Senator Ted Kennedy. You know, the jokes were always about Teddy, the red-faced senator. I remember a Christmas song that came out one time, but apparently he was known for drinking quite a lot. Husky voice, trembling hands, all these could be symptoms of that. Different categories of drugs. You've got your depressants, those that make you sleepy, barbiturates, methaqualone, and just some examples, Tylenol, your date rape drugs, alcohol. They appear to be drunk. A drunken appearance, poor muscle control, impaired balance, disorientation as to place and time, impaired memory with periods of blackouts, drooped eyelids, slow pupil response to light. Higher doses would be a low pulse rate, low blood pressure, depressed respiration. Those are your depressions. Stimulants, and this is an actual picture. They have this picture almost every drug seminar that you go to, and several others. If you can go right now, Google images, drug use before and after. This is really sad. You will see people, you know, on the January when she was not a drug user, and look how much has changed. And even, I mean, you can get more extreme pictures than this. These would be your amphetamines, methamphetamine, cocaine, grossly dilated pupils with just a rim of the colored iris, tremors in the hands, and general hyperactivity and wired. These are the people that want to clean all day, and they're just go, go, go. They're being stimulated. That's why their pupils are dilated. You know, if you get a shot of adrenaline or you get scared, your pupils dilate to give you more light so that you can see and run from that tiger that's chasing you. Tremors in the hands, flushed skin tone, sweating, dry mouth, high blood pressure, pulse rate, body temperature. Long-term addiction will display malnutrition, paranoia, aggression, and depression. We've heard about these designer drugs. Probably ecstasy is the most common of those. All different sizes and shapes. And I don't pretend to know everything there is about designer drugs, but some of these rave parties that you hear about, one of the things that you see is they will put the drug on the pacifier, and then they'll all go and get high sucking on the pacifier. Sometimes these new designer drugs, they will tweak them just a little bit so that the test may not be able to detect it. Then our narcotics, and this opium has been getting a lot of attention lately. Codeine. When I was younger, I remember if you got cough syrup, it had a little bit of codeine in it. They've taken that out now. It has to be a prescription to get codeine, but some of the teenagers really like cough syrup. And even if you didn't have a cough, if you took some of that, and so when I was a teenager, 30, 40, 30-some years ago, yeah, you could have cough syrup and it'd put you to sleep. OxyContin, a really real heavy-duty painkiller that is highly, highly addictive. My neighbor's son had a football injury. The doctor gives him OxyContin. My neighbor, to her credit, his mother, she saw OxyContin, she threw it all away. Says, no way am I having him take this. I've heard too many stories about kids getting addicted to OxyContin. And doctors are more careful with that now that they understand. There have been many people who have not had a problem before and they get hooked on that particular painkiller. Narcotics. You have those pinpointed pupils. They're relaxing you. Do not react to light. Droopy muscle tone. Face and arm itching. For whatever reason, they're scratching their skin. Sedated condition. And you're loopy. You're walking around, you know, kind of like a zombie. You're not with it. Marijuana. You know, most common type is to smoke that. You can also buy it in hash oil. And now we've heard quite a bit about this medical marijuana that still hasn't passed in Utah, but there have been some bills that have been defeated, but you'll probably hear more and more about that. Signs and symptoms of marijuana: a red cast to the white of the eyes. Of course, that could be a lot of things, right? Not enough sleep, and pupils will be dilated and both will not track a moving object in unison. Slight muscular tremor in the eyes, lids, fingers, silver-coated tongue. Apparently when you smoke marijuana, it kind of leaves a coating, a light-colored white or silver coating on the tongue. Mental disorientation or paranoia. I want to talk a little bit about drug testing. And in your program, who is subject to drug testing here, and what types of drug testing do you do?
Pre-employment.
Do pre-employment? Is that all jobs or safety sensitive? All jobs. Office employees, everybody goes through a pre-employment. Post-accident? All employees. Okay, random?
Yes.
Random. So you're doing it all then. That's like my, and then for suspicion. Different types of tests. Now the most common is that urine specimen, but that's not the only one. For alcohol, it's usually a blood alcohol test or the breathalyzer. For things like marijuana, THC, they can actually take a hair sample, and they're getting better and better at these. It depends, and don't worry about all these, all this wording up here. This gives the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, different schedules, and if you're, for example, if you're a truck driver, there's a 5-panel drug test that's the most common that they have to take. These are some different types of drugs, and it tells, well, okay, the drug detection time, 1 to 2 days after use. So if that employee doesn't get to that work med to be tested until a week after the injury, probably not in their system anymore. And those range 1 to 2 days, 1 to 4 days for cocaine, meth, 1 to 2 days. Codeine, heroin, 1 to 2 days. Methadone, morphine, 1 to 2 days. Methadone is 1 day to a week. Marijuana, 1 day to 5 weeks. And there's probably been more contested on marijuana, contested tests that say, hey, yeah, I smoked that 3 weeks ago, but that has nothing to do with now. It's, still in my system. That just for whatever reason, and in the hair, you can detect marijuana for over a month. So your drug policy needs to tell what drugs will be tested for. Again, that 5 panel is the most common. The name of the drug, the screening cutoff, and the confirmation cutoff. What is a cutoff point? What does that mean? Do I fail a drug test for marijuana if they're looking for a metabolite? Marijuana is changed when it goes through the body and it's metabolized to THC. But if they look for that, if they detect any, is that a failing the drug test? No, they've got a certain level for different drugs, and you can have this much in you, but you get above that, and that is considered a drug, a failure of the drug test. Usually what happens, in most cases, you send someone for the test, they do the cheaper test, and there's a cutoff for screening. If they're below the levels for the different five drugs, then that's a pass if you're below. They don't say, yeah, we detected a little bit. You might want to watch out for that employer, but they weren't above the level. That's a negative drug test if they're below that cutoff point. Then if they test positive, they send that out for a second. They do the immediate test, and they actually save some of the specimen, and then they will send that out for a more expensive, more thorough, you might say even more accurate test. If that second one is confirmed and they don't have a valid prescription or any other reason for being a positive drug test, then that would be reported to the employer as a positive drug test. Okay. Pre-employment testing, that's usually post-offer, after you've got the job offer and you say, okay, it's contingent on passing that drug test. Refusal to consent to a drug testing may stop any further actions toward employment or toward promotion or going into a different job. So that's something that you have the employees sign up. We're a drug-free workplace. You will be subject to a test. They sign off and date that. We've probably all been through that. That's pretty straightforward. Post-accident. This one's a little bit tricky. An incident occurring while on company business that results in an injury, requiring medical attention. Now, do you put it in your policy if you're injured, or do you put if you're injured and it could have been caused by being under the influence? For example, and I've had this happen more than once, but you have a worker working out on a construction site. They're down below another worker. The worker above them drops a wrench and it hits them in the head and they are injured. Would you send that employee? Would they have to do a post-accident drug test? Maybe. Depends on what your policy says. You have one employee that runs over another employee with the forklift. Do you send them both for a drug test if they're both injured? Now, was the employee who got run over, was it because they were high? Probably not. You need to make sure that that's defined. This is the trickiest one. I went out one time to a small company, and this has been 15 years when we were starting to get a handle on things. Now, most companies, even small companies, do some form of drug testing. And he says, I need help setting up a drug policy. And this was light assembly of different types of products, and then they would ship those out. So not really, they did have a forklift, but most of the jobs were very light assembly, folding boxes, things like that. He says, I want a drug, help me set up a drug program. So at that time we had the sample drug program, took it out to him, he says, I want to do random testing. And we're walking around the plant, and he says, I want to do random testing, and I want to test that guy and that guy. And I said, how come? And he says, just look at him. And the guy had this big, heavy jewelry, and he had an AC/DC t-shirt, and he's had these big earrings, and he says, doesn't he look like he's using drugs? I don't know. I don't know. You can't tell like that. But this one you really want to document. If you observe them using it, you observe somebody smoking marijuana or taking pills, or somebody selling it to another, abnormal conduct, their drug-related investigation. Maybe they're caught off-site, but you can say, hey, you know, we noticed in the paper you're being charged for drug possession. We have a right to drug test you. If they tamper with the source, or a coworker says, hey, I'm just letting you know it didn't come from me, but that employee is using drugs. Random testing, that's pretty easy if you let the testing lab take care of, make all the arrangements and things. They can test 1% to 100% of the employee population on an annual basis. So just last week, my number came up. So I got a call from HR, and they said, Flint, what are you doing today? Well, I'm out visiting a client. Okay. When would be the quickest time that you could go to a work med? Well, I could do that tomorrow. So I went to a work med and gave them my sample. What do you say when it's random? What do you say to that employee that says, you know what, I just don't believe it's random. I've been called in twice this year, and he's never been called in 2 years. How could that be random, right? Well, that is random. If every employee was called in exactly every year, that wouldn't be random. Okay. Sometimes when you go, and what I say to those employees, sometimes I'll have them, they'll tell me that, well, I don't believe that's random. Well, I'll say, well, have you ever been to Las Vegas? Do you see some people that win and most people that lose? That's random. When that slot machine's going to pay out, that's random. What is the frequency of random testing? Make sure that you have those forms signed. What happens, this is another phone call that I sometimes get. Hey, Flint, we've had that employee test positive. And this employee is one of our problem employees. What should I do? I would really like to terminate him. It's okay if I terminate him, isn't it? And they want, I guess, backup for their decision. Well, I don't know. What does your policy say? What does it say? Is it their first offense? Do you have other things documented? You really need to do things consistent with your policy. Now, from the workers' comp, in workers' comp, here's how it works. We pay 100% of the medical, but what happens if an employee tests positive for a drug, like maybe marijuana, and it caused or could have contributed to the accident? If it's pretty clear cut, we still have to pay 100% of the medical. We can deny the lost time portion of that claim. But if it is something that had nothing to do with that employee, even if they test positive, like let's say that an employee gets run over by the forklift, no fault of their own, and they happen to test positive, we would not deny that lost time because it had nothing to do with it. Now, the forklift operator, they crash it into a wall, that would be related to their being high. So we might do that. That you have to decide which laboratory you're going to use. And if you go and if you pick a good laboratory, they do all of this for you. They can be the ones who pick the numbers out of the hat so that you don't have to do that. Will you use that medical review officer? Procedures to confirm that positive test results. You need to make sure you preserve the confidentiality of that. who has access to the test results? Again, we don't publicize those and put them on the wall and say, these are all the employees who we've lost due to drug testing. Here's all the fails that we have. Or they passed, but they still detected some. All right, just a couple of questions I want to, and I've asked some of these. What do we do for that employee who they test positive, but it turns out they have a valid prescription for the opiate that they tested positive for, or whatever it is? What do you do for those employees? What? It's a negative test, but what if that employee drives a backhoe or a forklift? What do you do then? They're not, and in an ideal world, what would that employee do even before the drug test? They would say, hey boss, you know, I broke my ankle while I was out hiking, or I sprained my ankle. I'm under, for the next month, I've got this painkiller that I'm using. And you might reassign them or do something. These are all real challenges, and the answer is, I get these questions. I just got asked that very question the other day. This person, they tested positive, but they had a valid prescription, but they operate heavy equipment. What do we do? We don't have any other jobs. And I always go back to, well, what does your policy say? What does your policy say that you'll do? You know, be consistent with that. So is it easy to pass a drug test? Can you, if you bought, there's also some things that you can put in. And here's what, if you go to the people that do the testing, they're getting better and better and better and more sophisticated all the time. They haven't seen it all, but they've seen 99% of it. And the easy ways of faking a drug test, passing it when you shouldn't, they've got those all figured out. If you take somebody else's urine specimen, there's also an observed, when you give your specimen, if you are like fail the first time, or you say, no, I promise I'm not on drugs, but I need a retest. There's observed people, the lengths that people will go to keep their job and still keep up their drug habit are amazing. So one of the other things that you can buy, and I'm not going to be too graphic here, but you can buy prosthetic devices that in your same skin color so that you can show people, and you can have those in coordination with a urine specimen that you wear right next to your leg. And these people that do the drug testing, they have seen it. They've seen it all. They are pretty good. In fact, I would say their reliability, it has to be. If they say positive, you know, very rarely do they give a false positive. You'd have, and the chain of custody is very, very strict. And if you do that retest too, you know, you could go and say, well, I want to do a retest. But if that one comes back positive, it pretty much means that they did detect that. Now, if you went to a party and somebody else was smoking marijuana, maybe that might explain it. What do you do for that employee that you send them for a post-accident drug test and they just don't go do it? It's 3 or 4 days later, and then they say, oh yeah, I couldn't get in then. I was really sick, or I did this. And they wait 4 or 5 days, pass the drug test. What do you do about that? What is your policy? They get written up because that's your policy. Okay. That's pretty much what I had prepared for today. Does anyone have any questions or stories? So, Diane, do you deal with the drug testing? Okay. So, are these issues, are these questions that I asked, do you get asked those same questions by employees?
I have before, especially the one about what if I go to a concert?
Uh-huh.
You know, and I'm riding down with people that are smoking marijuana. they're
Yeah.
really choking down a lot that you would not have enough to really
Enough to
get
fill.
unless you're actually
Yeah. Yeah, most of the things when people say the poppy seed, the hemp oil. Well, I like that hemp oil, you know, you can buy that at a health food store. You can buy hemp oil. And it does have that marijuana marker metabolite in it, but most of those, the lab has seen those. And the olden days of drinking a lot of water, adding water to your specimen, putting Clorox in it, you know, for a while that interfered with the test, but they've pretty much figured those out. Okay. All right, if there's no more questions, did you have a question? Any questions? Okay. Then thank you for coming, and as always, be careful out there. That's our slogan at WCF, and enjoy the Tour de Utah or whatever it is that's today.
Thank you.
Thank you.